I'm Marcus Smith, and this is Constant Wonder. Join me on a quest to find awe and wonder in all creation, human or wild, vast or small. Spiritual encounters that move us beyond words. 26 years ago, in the heart of Zululand, a rundown hunting game reserve got a new name and new owners.
We were, both of us, going into a brand new adventure without knowing the consequences and not a clue of the responsibilities.
Françoise Malby and Malby-Anthony, a couple from the city of Durban, South Africa, made their risky move in 1998. It was an abrupt career switch for each of them. Françoise, originally from Paris, had never even seen an elephant in her life. She had been working in fashion. Lawrence, born in Johannesburg of English stock, was a businessman. Buying the reserve had originally been Lawrence's idea, but Françoise was no reluctant tag-along. She enthusiastically packed up her things to follow the dream. The wildlife reserve had once been the private hunting grounds of the mighty Zulu warrior Shaka, founder of the Zulu kingdom, and had remained a private hunting ground for most of the 20th century. But its heyday for that purpose had come to an end. During the next dozen-plus years as the new owners, Françoise and Lawrence gave their all, working as full partners in the venture, protecting, expanding, and reshaping the hunting reserve as a site for wildlife conservation. They gave the place a new name, Thula Thula, which in Zulu is a repetition of the word hush or quiet, with a sense of peace and tranquility. But whatever peacefulness they were able to achieve through their relentless hard work was shattered on March 2nd, 2012, when Lawrence, away on business in Johannesburg, suddenly passed away of a heart attack. Again, Thula Thula had initially been Lawrence's vision, but all these years later, Françoise has kept the dream alive. Françoise Malby-Anthony's story is beautifully full of wondrous connections between animals and humans, and connections that live on between her late husband and the living creatures who benefit from his legacy. We'll get to hear her share highlights of their story in this episode of Constant Wonder. Françoise grew up in Paris in a family of 4 children, but no pets.
I was very, very scared of dogs. In Paris, there are more dogs, more pets than children. When I used to see a dog walking on the pavement, I'm talking about big dogs, like German Shepherd or big dogs. I used to cross the road. I could not confront them. For whatever reason, I had a fear. I was scared that they would bite me or they would attack me. And nowadays, 8 dogs, big and small, all rescues. You must see my dogs running around a huge garden, and they are the only dogs who see elephants almost every day and rhinos. And it looks like a zoo, actually.
As an adult, before meeting Lawrence, and before any rescue dogs or anything resembling a zoo, Françoise worked as the head of the international department of a chamber of commerce in northern France. It was a job she loved.
I never thought that I would end up where I am today. Life in Paris was absolutely wonderful. I had a very good job. I was the first female executive in the Chamber of Commerce. I was traveling the world. So for me, that was going to be my life for the rest of my life. I was meeting amazing people. I mean, what else could I have dreamed of? And that was my life. And I was happy like that.
She traveled all over Europe, to Japan, South America, North Africa. It was on one of these international trips that she had a chance encounter while outside a London hotel waiting for a taxi with Malby-Anthony.
And it was 10 o'clock in the morning. It was snowing. It was freezing. It was minus 17. One of the coldest winters in London for many, many years. I was late for my meeting. I was going to Earl's Court to organize a trade show. I had a meeting at 10:15 or 10:30, couldn't find a taxi, impossible to find it. I was first in the queue. And the porter came to me, And he said, would you mind to share your taxi with a gentleman at the end of the queue? Because I'm just asking everyone where they're going. And he's going to Earl's Court as well. Well, I was not in a very good mood. And I just bent over to look at this guy at the end of the queue. And I looked at him and I shook my head. And I said no to the porter. And the porter, a very British porter, actually couldn't believe how rude I was. I gave him a bit of the French attitude, as they call it. And Lawrence actually reminded me years later, he said, I couldn't believe when you shook your head saying no, you didn't want to share your taxi with me. But anyway, I was punished. Karma got me because there was no taxi at all in London to take me to Earl's Court. So I had reluctantly had to go towards the tube station. And that's where I saw Lawrence, and he was lost. He was really confused. I think it was his first time in London. So I told him, listen, you look like a foreigner. You look lost. Let me show you how to take the tube. He said, okay. And this is how it started. So we went together to Earl's Court by tube, and then we came back by taxi. That's the true story. And then we came back. We were staying in the same hotel. And that evening I was going out with some girlfriends of mine from London. And then I told him, if you want to come with us, why not? And we went to a jazz club. And voila, that's how it all started.
After returning to their respective homes in Paris, France, and Durban, South Africa, Françoise and Lawrence kept in touch.
I did not know much about South Africa in those days. Lawrence, the way he spoke to me about it, it sounded very attractive. And I've always been a little bit of an adventurer. So when he told me come over for holidays, I said, okay. And this is how my life changed. I was 33 years old at that time. I met Lawrence in January 1987. And in December 1987, I just resigned from my job and decided to leave everything and move to that new continent on the other side of the planet. And I've never regretted it 1 second.
This may, in fact, have been precisely the sort of thing she had been looking for in life.
I always thought I would go and live in a foreign country in my life, but I wanted a bit of an organized country. I wanted a country where the quality of life was excellent, where the sun would shine the whole year, this kind of dream. I tried, I went to live in Venezuela, in South America. I went to live in Italy in my life. So I traveled quite a bit, but nowhere really hooked me to that country. But South Africa, from the first day I arrived, the people were absolutely wonderful. The country was amazing. Everything. There's a huge diversity in this country. And it was very promising as well. It was still apartheid in 1987, but it was the end of apartheid. So the future was promising for the better.
Françoise and Lawrence lived for 10 years in Durban, she sewing and designing apparel, and he in various business enterprises, including real estate. Then one day, Lawrence came home with a crazy idea he had been brewing of buying a 2,500-acre game preserve. Really? Even with all the challenges this would entail? Not just elephants and rhinos, but local politics and even poachers. None of this would be small potatoes. I asked Françoise if Lawrence's scheme caught her by surprise.
A little bit, but knowing Lawrence, he was just full of surprises all the time. When he told me that, I had my fashion business at that time. So I told him, okay, so must I stop that? He said, yes, because we're moving to Zululand. And I said, okay, why not? A new adventure is like having a new life every time, you see, Marcus. This is what's wonderful about having a bit of an adventurous spirit. So we moved to Zululand. We sold the house and totally unprepared, not knowing where we were putting our feet. Really not. Just a little anecdote is that when I wrote my first book, An Elephant in My Kitchen, there's a lady from America. She sent me an email telling me, Françoise, my dream has always been to own a game reserve in Africa. But since I've read your book, I've changed my mind.
You say you were unprepared. I'm wondering if that means unqualified. Was he an ecologist? Was he a zoologist? Was he a ranger?
Not at all. Not a clue. Not a clue. Not a clue. Not a clue. I had never seen an elephant in my life. I think he had seen some, maybe because he used to live in Zimbabwe, in Zambia. But no, he was not even a bush kind of guy. No. We were, both of us, going straight into a brand new adventure without knowing the consequences and how to run a game reserve, how to deal with local rural Zulu community. Not a clue of the responsibilities, the fencing, the maintenance of the land. It was a small game reserve, very small. A fence was only 1,000 hectares. It used to be a hunting game reserve. So there was very little game. You could hardly see even an impala, which is a little antelope. You couldn't even see them because they were so scared of hunters. So when we bought it, we stopped all that, of course. And I remember it was very peaceful in those days. It was a beautiful piece of land. And I think that so the reason why Lawrence bought it, because he had a vision of a huge conservation land where animals could roam freely. And because animals need space, we need more space for wildlife.
What was Lawrence doing prior to this professionally? What was his line of work?
He was in business, in property development before, and he had various businesses. He had an estate agency as well.
So what you're telling me is that because he was in property development, at least he knew how to buy land.
Exactly. Yes, at least he knew that. Yeah, exactly. Now, the only difference is that now it was to put animals on the land.
Elephants, for starters, and not just any elephants. In just a moment, we're going to hear about angry, alarmed, rogue elephants. I can't help but see the irony in the name Thula Thula as the first two words of a beloved Zulu lullaby. They signify peace, quiet, tranquility.
Thula Thula is a lullaby for children. It means sleep well, my baby.
Thula Thula Baba Thula Sana.
The first instance of rescue animals arriving at Thula Thula was anything but peaceful. You have to understand that Lawrence and Françoise, as the new owners, had already taken on a hefty loan to obtain the land, and the space wasn't entirely or properly fenced. These new owners weren't actually planning to acquire new or additional wildlife right away, but just months after the land purchase, Françoise and Lawrence got an unexpected phone call from a fellow South African, Dr. Marion Garai, chairperson of the Space for Elephants Foundation. Garai was desperate to rehome a herd of elephants that were going to be shot for all the trouble they had been causing on a reserve near Kruger National Park, over 400 miles away.
It was a very stressing time because when we got that phone call from that lady telling us there is a herd of 9 elephants who are going to be put down unless they get saved and accepted in the game reserve and so on. Lawrence, of course, he said yes, of course. But here again, without thinking, how are we going to do that? You see, that was Lawrence. He was very much like that. Yes, we will. And now we have got 3 weeks to fence before the elephants arrived. But then we were told they were problem elephants. What kind of problem? We didn't even really ask. We knew they were kind of escape artists, but not to that extent.
While scrambling for the funds they would need to repair and electrify 20 miles of fencing, Lawrence and Françoise at first stalled for time, but Lawrence always seemed to have a solution. As Françoise puts it, he was able to work his magic money tree, and the funding came through. Round-the-clock work commenced and took on a furious pace. Car headlights were needed by night. If 3 weeks didn't seem like much time to get this fencing done, things were about to get worse yet. Lawrence had to take an emergency trip to Germany shortly before the herd was to arrive. While he was gone, Françoise got another phone call, this time from the manager of the reserve that owned the elephants.
They call me, they say, that's it, the elephants have escaped again. We have to leave with them tomorrow. We've organized a truck. We didn't have the fencing yet. We finished electric fencing, under strict specifications. So we had nothing. We had to keep them waiting for another 2-3 days. And eventually they arrived. Eventually we were ready to welcome them. But we had to employ 100 people to finish that fence in 3 weeks. It was a huge amount of work. And voila. And then the elephants arrived at 3:00 in the morning. It was pouring with rain. The truck got stuck.
This huge truck, large enough to carry a herd of elephants, was forced to make a detour over rolling grasslands because it was too heavy to cross a small bridge on the regular road. Just as it entered the gates of Thula Thula, it blew a tire. A spare was put on. The whole rig then sank in mud. The driver had to free the truck with its living cargo by throwing it in reverse. We've all been there, just not with elephants. Eventually, having reached the reserve, the truck backed up to the entrance of a 2.5-acre special enclosure called a boma, also constructed in the nick of time. Boma, B-O-M-A, is a British term. It means British Officer Mess Area. It's a corral, a temporary holding pen for newly arrived animals, so they can grow accustomed to their new home before release into the larger reserve. A 5-strand electric fence now stood along the perimeter to form this enclosure. Here's Françoise describing the moment these elephants were released into the boma.
Those elephants were, trumpeting and not happy and banging the walls of that truck. They were all in separate compartments of the trucks, of course. And it was quite the kind of moment that you never forget.
What were you experiencing and feeling?
Complete panic. The feeling of what they were feeling, those elephants, this is what was really getting into me. I was thinking those elephants in dark containers. They've been driven for 14 hours, and now they don't have a clue what's happening. They don't understand what's happening. And I was feeling for them terribly, and I was feeling the unhappiness that those elephants were feeling, their anger and their reactions banging against the wall. It was like a horror movie for me. Animals trumpeting and screaming their anger or their anxiety. There was a baby, there was little Mandla, he was only 2 years old. His mother was in the compartment next to him. He wasn't even next to his mother. So it brought a lot of anxiety.
The veterinary staff administered tranquilizers to calm the terrified creatures, and the transporters led the elephants one by one into the boma.
We counted them, there were only 7. When they came out, that's when we found out that the matriarch and her baby had been killed. Because she was, according to the previous owners, she was the one responsible to be the leader of the escapes. What, obviously, they did not know, that she had passed on all her knowledge. Elephants, that's the way they are. They communicate with each other. They can see. So there was one of the older females that we called Nana. She learned from the previous matriarch how to escape and how to run away and how to lead the herd. So this is where Nana is the one who decided 24 hours after their arrival to escape and to push a tree against the fence. How did she learn that? She learned that from the previous matriarch, of course. So that was the beginning of a real adventure with this herd of elephants. They were traumatized. They were unhappy. They'd been moved against their will. Their matriarch had been killed, the baby as well. So it was a very dramatic time. Those elephants escaped, and then we found out, there were hunters after them. People wanted to put them down. They were problem elephants. Nobody wants problem elephants. But Lawrence was determined to keep them. So it took us a week to get them back.
Lawrence brought in helicopters to look for the escapees.
And after a week, we found them game reserve, which is not very far from Thula Thula. It's called Umfolozi. and got them back, redarted them, put them in a truck, 7 of them, back at Thula Thula. And from that day, we were told if they escape again, they will be put down on site. They will be shot on site. And Lawrence was determined to save this herd of elephants that they would not be put down. So what he did, he spent 24 hours a day for 12 days around the boma. Every time Nana was trying to push a tree, he could feel there was something happening. And Lawrence used to go there and talk to her, sing to her, calling her, "Hello, my beautiful." he was a big charmer, Lawrence. And he charmed Nana so well.
Did he actually have a good singing voice?
He did, actually. He could sing very well. And he could play guitar and he could sing. Yeah, absolutely. And well, Nana was under the charm, obviously. And she told her family, well, I think we're going to stay here. I think we're not going to try to escape again and go back home where they treat us so badly. Let's stay here. And that was the beginning of the herd of elephant staying at Thula Thula. Well, it was a beautiful moment when eventually we released them from the boma and they were free at last to roam into their new little home.
Lawrence's 2-week vigil over the newly arrived elephants had paid off. The elephants felt at home, no longer trying to escape. And in just a moment, we'll see how strong his connection to these 3-ton creatures was. That bond likely saved his life, and the life of Françoise, when the two of them had a tense exchange with a female named Frankie from this herd. I'm Marcus Smith, and our guest for this episode of Constant Wonder is Françoise Malby-Anthony, the owner and operator of Thula Thula Private Game Reserve in South Africa. Embark on a whimsical journey with The Appleseed and host Sam Payne. It's one of many shows from the BYU Radio family of podcasts. Wrap yourself in captivating stories, expertly woven by talented storytellers. You'll hear live studio audiences taking immense delight in a broad tapestry of tales, some humorous, others poignantly reflective. The Appleseed is always a family-friendly experience. It sparks imagination creative enough to make fiction feel like fact and bring real-life events back to life. The Appleseed. Listen wherever you get your podcasts. We now return to Constant Wonder. After the elephants newly arrived at Thula Thula had spent 12 days in the small 2.5-acre enclosure, the boma, Lawrence and Françoise released them into the bush area of the wider reserve. As we've said, 1,000 hectares. That's about 2,500 acres. The couple decided to take a ride on an ATV-type motorbike to check on them in the bush, all the while praying that they had not escaped again.
And we went all around because the elephants had been released now. They are in the wild, free roaming. We're happy and everything, but with Lawrence, we look for them. So we go on top of the hill, and from the top of the hill, I'm behind Lawrence on the motorbike, and right next to the river, he spots them. So we go there, we cross the river.
Descending the hill, though, the couple on their motorbike lost sight of the elephants in the bush.
So we didn't see them at first. When we came out of the riverbed, we ended up nose to nose with the elephants who got a fright. We got a fright. We all got a fright. They don't like noise. You see, unfamiliar noise like a motorbike or tractor. They don't really like this kind of noise. The elephant is not natural. Some of the smaller elephants went at the back, and Frankie arrived like a fury. That as well, a moment that I'll never forget. I'm behind Lawrence, and we're trying to move the motorbike back or forward, and we're stuck. Lawrence tells me, we've got a problem. Knowing Lawrence, always so optimistic and positive, I knew we had a problem. I closed my eyes at that time and started praying. What else do you want to do? You got that 4-ton elephant who is charging, moving her ears. Then she got her ears at the back. Her tail is up, which is a sign I've learned afterwards of being very unhappy. It's a sign of a charge. And she's moving up and back and up and back. She's about maybe 2 meters away from us. And then Lawrence tells me, takes his gun out of his pocket, and I tell him, no, don't shoot, because you don't know what's going to be the reaction of those elephants. So he gives me his gun. He's got the amazing reflex of standing up. So he lifts himself from the motorbike and with his arms around his head, like making him bigger, He said, it's okay, my Baba. I used to call them my Baba. It's okay, my Baba. It's me. So Frankie just looked at him and she looked at him again and she kind of did a half a charge. And he repeated himself. He said, it's okay, my Baba. It's me. And she stopped completely. By that time, I was trembling so much. Like when you're just going to die. I was like that. And suddenly she just stopped and she backed off. And to watch an elephant backing off is something very impressive as well, because it's a huge creature. She backed off and she turned around and she gave us that look that only Frankie had. Frankie, she had that look, over her shoulder. She like, don't do it again, kind of thing. And they moved away into the bush. We waited until the elephants moved away and we started the motorbike again. And we tried to take a road opposite to theirs. And we went very fast and we went away. We really thought we were not going to make it that time. It was a real charge. And Frankie was not. She had no sense of humor, Frankie. And, I think that the reason why we survived is because Lawrence had been talking to them so much and giving them food as well. When they were in the Boma, like fruit and water and so on, that's how they survived for those 12 days. So they remembered that. They remembered his voice. And that's how we survived, thanks to communication.
So this whole issue of taming is maybe not the right word, because you want them to remain wild, and yet there's communication. Is this typical for people managing a reserve to interact with elephants in this way?
Not at all, because it's not everyone who gets problem elephants who don't like humans. Lawrence created that relationship with Nana, the matriarch, and a relationship with all the others as well. By the help of Nana, it was trust. The trust. This is what they discovered. They could trust humans again. And they realized that they were not in danger at Thula Thula. And this is what made the difference with that herd of elephants. They realized that they were in the right place now. Nothing was going to happen to them, that they were protected. They were true survivors, and they had made it in a land where they could be happy at last, and where they would not try to escape again because they had no reason. I think they felt the love, and this is where the whole difference is between other landowner of elephants and us. The trust that they gained in humans thanks to Lawrence's intervention. So there's no taming, it's just gaining the trust of elephants.
And his method, you've mentioned singing, you've mentioned speaking to them, you've mentioned giving them food. Other aspects, other tricks?
Yeah, giving them compliments all the time. Female elephants are very sensitive to compliments. You are beautiful, blah, blah, blah. That worked very well, obviously. The tone of voice is not what he say, it's a tone. I don't think a lot of people had been singing to them before, so it was quite a new thing. But I think the elephant, they felt it. That's all. It's just an exchange of emotions between human and animals, and the respect as well.
Not once in my life have I had any need to establish cordial relations with an elephant. So I asked Françoise if it was okay to reach out and stroke or pet an elephant, and as it turns out, it's not okay to do that with an elephant you want to live as if in the wild. But Lawrence knew that his long vigil at the boma was paying off after an elephant there reached out to him.
It happened once with Nana. This is how. Over the fence in the boma, and this is where I think she showed him that he had gained their trust.
Did she reach out to him? Did he reach out to her?
She reached out to him. She lifted her trunk and he lifted his arm. And that's the way it all started.
Françoise was present for many of these beautiful moments, but it was Lawrence who kept the vigil at the boma. He was the one who worked every day with the animals. During these years, from 1999 until Lawrence's death in 2012, Françoise, with her business background, was mainly in charge of the business side of the reserve. Marketing, reservations, hosting guests, hiring and training staff, the finances of the operation, the building of a lodge and a luxury tent camp for visitors. In all of this, Françoise would quite naturally put her French touch on daily life in the South African bush. She once cooked up crocodile served in vol au vent, in a shell of puff pastry.
It was for a wedding, a small wedding, and I decided to do something extremely creative, and completely out of the ordinary. So crocodile doesn't have much taste. So you have to put a lot of seasoning and a lot of spice and so on. So I decided to do a crocodile curry. But I wanted a French touch. So I put it in a vol au vent. And I thought, and why not add up a bit of chocolate on top? So that made a crocodile curry vol au vent with chocolate and chili sauce. I mean, that was what I say. I call that memorable. I didn't say it was good or bad. Just memorable. They still remember it. They still talk about it. And that was 20-something years ago.
It must have done its job. I'm guessing the marriage held.
It did its job. Usually, I like to test all my new experimental cooking on my game rangers before I serve it to the guest. But they refuse categorically to taste crocodile. They say they refuse to eat crocodile because it's a carnivore. Interesting. So nobody in my kitchen wanted to taste it. So I served it directly to the guest and they survived.
Now, I don't know the range of different languages in South Africa. Zulu is clearly one of them. You come from France,
yeah.
And I understand you had some interesting encounters just trying to communicate. I guess people took you to task for having a French accent when speaking Zulu.
Yes. Yeah. I studied Zulu for 1.5 years when we bought Thula Thula. I really wanted to get into the whole cultural thing, and I wanted to be able to speak Zulu to my staff because, you see, people love it when you speak their language, and I've got a strong accent in English, I believe. But my Zulu, I must have a very funny accent as well because, well, they never heard a French person speaking Zulu. So every time I was doing my extremely well-structured, dramatically well-structured sentences that I had studied, and they look at me with big round eyes and kill themselves laughing. So I got very shy after that to speak Zulu. But I can still get along and say a few things there. But I must say they get very impressed when I tried my best Zulu on them. They like it. They think it's fun to make the effort.
Françoise and her kitchen staff had great fun with language, including completely new words of their own making, often based on onomatopoeia.
When I was training them how to cook, I could never remember the word food processor. I used to have several words. There's a chuk-chuk, and there is a vroom vroom, and there is a dak-a-dak. So they knew exactly what I was talking about, which was quite interesting. So any other person not familiar with that vocabulary who was not able to understand what he was saying. But so we had an understanding because they didn't know what a food processor was as well. They were all from the local rural Zulu village next door. They didn't know what a food processor was. They didn't know what I don't even know the name in English now because I'm so used to use those funny terms. There's a vroom vroom, the chuk chuk. There's a tagadak, and there's a poof. Anyway, everything means something amongst us. It's like having a dialect.
Françoise clearly felt camaraderie with her staff. Yet that goodwill, those warm feelings, nevertheless were not reciprocated by all of Thula Thula's neighbors in this region that historically had turned to wild game for food. Local relations could be delicate, even fraught at times for these people from the city who nurtured grand ideas of saving wildlife. More on those tensions in just a moment, here on Constant Wonder. I'm Marcus Smith. There's another podcast you might like from the BYU Radio family of podcasts. It's called In Good Faith. Stephen Camp Perry is the host. He visits with people of various faith traditions. These guests are generous and compassionate and share in their own words firsthand experiences of their faith, hope, and belief. It's a chance to deepen our collective understanding of what it's like to live a spiritual life. And by the way, Stephen has a global perspective. He has cultivated that over a lifetime of travel, and that enlivens every conversation he has. In Good Faith, an inspiring journey. Be sure to listen wherever you get your podcasts. We now return to Constant Wonder. My guest for this episode is Françoise Malby-Anthony, author of An Elephant in My Kitchen, What the Herd Taught Me About Love, Courage, and Survival. When she and her partner Lawrence purchased the Thula Thula Reserve, they had to fence 2,500 acres. Their main focus was keeping those elephants in. But there were other challenges. They also needed to keep poachers out. And yet their neighbors often relied on small game for subsistence, and so they poached on the reserve.
The local people who believe that it's their game and they're entitled to come and shoot an impala now and then. So that's a kind of poaching that we deal with most of the time. Poaching is a sensitive thing because you've got to be careful. You know, when it's a subsistence poaching from the local community, they get very upset if something happens to one of their community members. We have to accept that a little bit, but not too much, because, we don't do any hunting at Thula Thula, but at the same time, we have to organize some game for them, for the chief. We organize some antelope sometimes for the chief to keep them happy, to make them understand. But at the same time, we tell them, above all, during COVID, when we had terrible poaching, we used to tell them, these are not our animals, these are you animals. They belong to Africa. The day there are no more animals in Africa, nobody will come and visit Africa or South Africa. Nobody will come to game reserve.
Subsistence poaching, then, calls for ongoing friendly negotiation with people who literally live off the land. On another scale altogether are the poachers who are after rhino horns. Thula Thula is a sanctuary for rhinos as well. These poachers are armed and dangerous to the humans who live and work at the reserve, as well, of course, to the animals. For this reason, Thula Thula has its own armed security guards who live with the risk of being attacked. And Françoise has learned some painful lessons over the years. Here's what she says about rhino poachers.
So that is organized crime. The worst one is a rhino poaching, of course, rhino poaching. We haven't been touched by elephant poaching yet in this part of South Africa. Rhino poaching, because we have got a big rhino population in KwaZulu-Natal. In 2009, we had lost our last rhino, Heidi, killed by poachers. We found her the following morning. And that same year, we decided to get two little rhinos, Tabo and Tombi, because obviously this poaching leaves orphans behind. So there are different ways to fight poaching. You got education. I'm talking about rhino poaching. Education, which is to inform the world that The rhino horn has got no medicinal value, but all this has got to be educating in another part of the world, which is Eastern Asia. And it's very difficult to educate people so far away. They don't know that those rhinos are being slaughtered for the horn. And those horns have got no medicinal value whatsoever. Although it sells for between $60,000 and $90,000 a kilo in powder in Vietnam and China.
Constant surveillance is necessary to keep the rhinos safe.
You monitor them and you check them every day, 24 hours a day. This is what our anti-poaching team does now. And I think it works. I mean, so far I'm touching wood, but it's working. It's working as a deterrent to follow our rhinos. I know where they are every half an hour. We get photos of them. We know exactly where they are. We've got 5 rhinos at the moment. So that's working.
So are these remote cameras or automated cameras set up for surveillance?
No, I've got people following the rhinos. I've got human beings. My game rangers follow them from 6 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock at night. They take photos just to show all of us to a private group where they are. Then at night, they're being followed by a part of my anti-poaching unit. I'm talking about armed guys with vehicles, etc. On top of that, I mean, we've got cameras all around the game reserve, cameras hidden in trees, which is as well a good deterrent for poachers. Just my elephants don't like those cameras and they keep putting them down and destroying them. They don't like to be taken on photos, our elephants, obviously.
In March 2012, Lawrence was in Durban to attend a conservation gala dinner to raise awareness about the rhino poaching crisis and to launch his book, The Last Rhinos. Before the dinner, he collapsed of a heart attack, which he did not survive. Buying Thula Thula had been his idea, so I had to know if Françoise ever contemplated packing up and going somewhere else.
You know what? It never, ever crossed my mind. There were gossips saying that I was going back to France just because I'm a foreigner and just because Lawrence passed away. I'm a woman, and women don't run this kind of operation. You know, women on their own, it doesn't happen. There were gossips, and I don't know where they come from. Like gossips usually do. I never, ever had the intention of going back to France. We had created that beautiful place. It was 2012. And we started in 1998. So that was 14 years of hard work to create an amazing team, to create 2 beautiful lodges, and to create a good reputation as well. And I had that amazing herd of elephants. There were 21 when Lawrence passed away. And we had those baby rhinos as well. I mean, my whole family was there. There was no way I was going to leave.
When Françoise says that her family was there, this is no hyperbole. And if she felt like the massive creatures were her kin, it's actually fair to say that they reciprocated this feeling, evidenced by an astounding event that took place just after Lawrence's death, when the elephants, as a herd, emerged from far off in the bush.
The elephants came to the house, which was an amazing moment. 2 days after Lawrence passed away, and they all came and stood in front of me for hours.
Are you willing to say that those animals knew what had happened?
Well, this is a very good question. This is obviously my interpretation. Of course, they knew something happened because when we heard about the death of Lawrence, he was far away. So he didn't die at Thula Thula. But they felt, because the news felt like a bomb at Thula Thula. We were all in shock. We were all numb. We were like zombies, like ghosts. Everybody was extremely emotional. Of course, the elephants felt it. Of course, when you know elephants, when you know animals in general, they can feel your feelings. That time was extremely emotional for everybody. And why did they come? And they stood for hours at the house. Were they paying their respect? Were they wondering what was happening? Were they trying to tell us something? Of course, they were communicating something. That's absolutely evident. Above all, those elephants, a very amazing relationship they had with Lawrence. They knew that something had happened. Do they know exactly that he was dead? That is difficult to interpret. But I mean, interpretation of the behavior of animals is always from your own perspective. Those elephants coming to visit me triggered in me a lot of emotions, of course, and made me realize that now my job was to take care of them and the rhinos and all the animals on this farm. So those elephants, they were like telling me, you see, you're not alone. They gave me a sense of direction. They gave me a purpose. They gave me a reason. Well, I had the reason to carry on before, but I think the emotional impact that this herd had on me was quite phenomenal.
This is a personal question, and I just have to be very careful because I understand this was immediately after you had received this horrific news. And so I hate to use the word that the elephants offered some kind of comfort or consolation. I'm wondering, though, if you can characterize what that event did for you.
It was like a message, a powerful message. They cared so much, and they were survivors themselves. And this is a message that we're there. And knowing their resilience, knowing they were survivors, their visit was an inspiration for me. It was going to help me to cope with adversity and to be able to move on with my life on my own and be able to fight and be able to move on, carry on the work I couldn't stop.
Françoise did not doubt that the elephant's visit was purposeful, that it was intended to send a message. But even if she had doubted, what happened the following 2 years was even more amazing.
But what is the most incredible phenomenon is when they came back a year later, exactly the same day, the 4th of March, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. How can this happen? But the following year, exactly same day, same time, those elephants arrived again at the house and posted exactly the same way as last time, in front of my house, stood there for a long time. What does that mean, all this, Did they know it was exactly the same time? Do they have a sense of time, the elephants? I don't think so. It was just instinctive, or it was just pure coincidence that they came back the same day, but it was extraordinary. 3 years in a row. 3 years in a row.
So I'm assuming that it was not common for the animals in a group to come clear up to the house.
No. Not like that. No, they used to come. They used to come and visit now and then, but a different way. That way was different. They came as a procession. And they stood, standing in front of my house. It was different from the other times. That's why it was so unique. Now they used to come and visit, of course, and say hello and go other way or eating, whatever. No, they were all standing in front of the house.
Did you do something to acknowledge that they had come? Did you greet them? Did you interact with them? Did you touch them? What was your reaction to their procession?
No, I just stood there, showing my presence. The thing is that you mustn't touch them. These are wild elephants. I can always talk to them, but communication can come through silence as well. And just by being present, getting the smell. And I know they know my voice and so on. But sometimes silence can say more than words.
Despite the pain of Lawrence's loss and the lack of confidence that many people had in her, Françoise persevered with grit and humor. She'd been dealing with the business side of Thula Thula. Now she had to learn the animal conservation side.
So I was totally unprepared. I realized that I had a lot to learn. And I did. I believe that if you can read and write, you can learn. And you can learn anything. Lawrence didn't know anything when we started Thula Thula. He learned. So why not me? I mean, I know I'm a blonde, but I did learn and it did work.
Poaching. It's one of the major challenges Françoise has remained up against. And poaching isn't limited to mature animals. A few years before Lawrence's death, Françoise had the idea to bring in orphaned animals, a nursery for some very large babies, rhino orphans. While the orphanage didn't open officially until 2014, back in 2009, you'll remember, Françoise had taken in a couple of orphaned rhinos on an emergency basis, Thabo and Tombi.
2 weeks after Lawrence passed away, one of my baby rhinos got shot at. He didn't die, Thabo, just got shot at. And that's when I realized that the responsibility of anti-poaching was falling into my shoulders now. That's why I started working a little bit with the anti-poaching team. And that's when I realized how useless they were. That's where I decided to change everything.
Françoise was dealing with multiple challenges at once. With Lawrence not there, some staff members didn't want to answer to a woman. Then there was the fact that she didn't speak Zulu well enough, and most of the staff didn't speak English or French well enough, especially not well enough to discuss a thorny topic such as poaching. And there was speculation that the attack on Thabo had been an inside job, which complicated the situation significantly. And to name yet another challenge for Françoise, people just didn't expect her, a foreigner, to succeed. Oh, and on top of all this, money was tight.
A lot of people were unsure about me. I had very hard times. The first 2 years were terrible.
It would take her several years, actually, to identify her most loyal guards, fire those who had been complicit with poachers, and then to arrange for professional training for her retained personnel. Here I'm talking about training from anti-poaching specialists, paramilitary guys with big guns who know all the signs of poaching. When Françoise first brought in these professionals to assess the extent of the poaching activity, their sweep of the park revealed 63 snares. Even with all the training she invested in her guards, Françoise knew that she'd never be completely rid of poachers. And after another particularly traumatizing attack, Françoise made a painful decision to take one additional step to protect her rhinos. The event I'm referring to once again involved young rhinos at her beloved orphanage.
That was a very sad story. The rhino orphanage was a dream come true. Opened in 2014, we got a few rhinos, all orphans, all already traumatized because their mother had been killed by poachers.
In February of 2017, Françoise reports that 5 heavily armed men forced their way into the orphanage.
They locked up the volunteers into a room, and then they went to kill 2 baby rhinos, 18 months old, to steal their horns.
The horn on an 18-month-old rhino is only about 12 to 15 centimeters long. That's a mere 5 to 6 inches.
It's not big. To kill them for that was just, it's not even criminal is not the word. It's just revolting, absolutely revolting. And of course, I don't want to talk about corruption, whatever, but I mean, it does exist, of course. You know, it's like in the drug business, when there's a lot of money involved, you've got lots of corruption. So the culprits were never found. Incredible, in the middle of Zululand like that, 5 guys, they took the horns and they disappeared. So that was dramatic. It's organized crime. Those guys, they knew exactly the names of the volunteers. They knew exactly what they were doing. They had been observing the whole place for a while. It's been one of the biggest tragedies that we've had at Thula Thula.
Security was not enough, and so Françoise would have to take steps to deter the poaching in the first place by dehorning.
And after that, I decided to dehorn, all my rhinos, and we carry on doing it because the horns of rhinos are like nails or hair, and we have to cut them every 14 months for their protection. And it's not nice things to see. Helicopters, traumatizing, helicopter flying and darting the rhinos. And then we cut the horn, and then the poor rhino doesn't know where he is, completely disorientated. But it's a necessity. We haven't got a choice.
As terrifying as the dehorning process is for the rhino, I asked if they missed the horn once it was gone.
No, according to the veterinarians, it's like us cutting our hair. It's exactly the same thing. The only difference with the rhino, that their horn is to defend themselves against other animals attacking them. But it's mainly lions, maybe, or big animals like that. It's their own weapon in a way. But we don't have lions anyway, so we don't have real big predators. So it's not a problem for us.
How are you carrying on with your current hopes, your aspirations, your dreams for Thula Thula, and whatever might be accomplished for the good of the animals and for the people that you work with and for the surrounding community and for the environment? What is your vision? You've talked so much about Lawrence's vision that he had, and now that is your vision at this point, going forward. What is it?
My vision is two things. Two main projects at Thula Thula. Number one, protecting the animals at all times with a top-notch anti-poaching, the top security. Number two is to expand the land as much as I can. This has been extremely successful.
Thula Thula began as a 2,500-acre preserve 26 years ago. In 2024, after a deal that's currently in negotiations, the wildlife park will be more than 11,000 acres, more than quadruple its original size. She's buying land from the local community.
They accept to put it for wildlife conservation, which is wonderful because we share the same vision and the same passion. We're going to help them as well to create a Zulu traditional village where tourists from Thula Thula, our clients, will go and visit. That will bring employment, that will bring them some money as well. With more land means more babies. Rhino population as well needs to increase tremendously because of the numbers are down because of poaching. So we've already, during this past 12 years, we got in 2 more females and 1 more male. The new male rhino is called Rambo, and he's doing a very good job. I think all my 3 rhino females are all pregnant. So we're working at repopulating endangered species. You know that elephants are on the endangered species list as well. We want to specialize in endangered species, maybe getting black rhinos as well. And once we've increased the land, we'll be able to get cheetahs, and only 7,000 left on the planet. So you see, this is all the project I've got, increasing the land. That was what Lawrence wanted originally, creating a big conservation area where animals could roam free and be happy. And voila, so this is what I do.
Our show, of course, is called Constant Wonder. In your telling of the herd and those very precious, memorable moments of silence, there's certainly wonder in that. I'm just wondering if, in that experience or in life generally, have you got your own personal interpretation of the function of awe, of wonder in our lives, in your life?
We must all find our passion, which is going to create such emotions and such unique moments in our life. I would say that I've discovered it with animals. I can feel what animals feel. This is what creates my amazing moments in my life, whether it's elephants or rhinos, and I feel when they're sad, I feel when they're happy. It's kind of like a transmission of feelings.
Over the years since his passing, as you've been doing this alone, carrying on Lawrence's vision, have you ever had a sense of his presence, felt his presence there with you?
Of course. I think he's always present anyway. He's always present everywhere. I believe in that, absolutely.
What does that feel like, his presence? Is it a thing you can articulate even? Do you hear his voice?
I don't hear his voice, no. I just feel it. It's just a feeling. It's a feeling. And some vision sometimes, some strange vision I've got. I see like a movement. I feel a movement. Yeah. I cannot say much about it, but yeah, I say that all this gives me the strength to carry on and to not giving up, believing that more achievement is possible, and we must not fear adversity. We mustn't fear challenges. We must just look at them, go through them, and overcome them. And believe in the impossible, never give up, and never stop learning.
Françoise Malby-Anthony, author of, most recently, The Elephants of Thula Thula. And watch for her forthcoming cookbook, Dinner with Elephants, with recipes and more stories of life at Thula Thula. This episode of Constant Wonder was produced by Tenery Taylor with help from Audrey Hughes, Elaine Scott, and sound design by James Call. I'm Marcus Smith. If you like what you're hearing here on Constant Wonder, please leave us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform app. It helps so very much to get the word out so we can keep bringing you great stories full of awe and wonder. Constant Wonder is a production of BYU Radio.